Captain Rachel Monroe's reflection glimmered faintly in the polished glass wall of the Pentagon's West Conference Room. Her uniform, freshly pressed and neatly fitted, reflected the morning light filtering through the tall windows. She had been awake since 4:30 a.m., rehearsing her presentation for the 10th time, her nerves hidden behind calm precision. The Air Force crest over her left pocket caught the light small, simple, yet everything she had worked for since she was 22. The meeting was scheduled to start at 9 sharp. It was 8:57. Every senior officer in the room seemed to speak louder than necessary, their laughter echoing through the sterile space. Most wore Army or Marine uniforms, dark greens and khakis, that contrasted sharply against her Air Force blue. She could feel their glances. She'd felt them before. The outsider uniform. The one that didn't belong in their kind of room. She took a deep breath, clutching the edge of the conference table, the faint hum of the projector in the background, like static in her chest. Today wasn't just another briefing. This was the final evaluation for her tactical coordination software, a system she'd developed over 14 months of sleepless nights, trial deployments, and tense simulations. If approved, it would revolutionize how different branches communicated in real time during high-pressure operations. If rejected, it would be buried in bureaucratic silence. At precisely 9 o'clock, Colonel Davis entered the room, his medals gleaming. He was tall, sharp-jawed, and carried the air of a man used to commanding attention. The conversation hushed. He set his papers down, eyed the projector, then turned his gaze toward Rachel. His expression faltered briefly surprise, maybe confusion, before settling into something colder. "You're Captain Monroe?" he asked, his voice clipped, like he was confirming a bad rumor. "Yes, sir," she replied, standing straight. "Captain Rachel Monroe, Air Force Systems Integration." He raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Did the Air Force run out of analysts? Or did they send you because the colonel was busy?" A few officers chuckled quietly. One even leaned back, muttering something under his breath that made another snicker. Rachel felt the sting immediately, that familiar flush of heat rising to her neck. It wasn't the first time. She'd heard the jokes before. Data girl, PowerPoint captain, the woman with ideas. She could ignore it, but not today. Not here. She straightened her papers deliberately and gave a tight smile. "No, sir. I was chosen because this system has already been field tested under active conditions. I'll be presenting those results today." Colonel Davis leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "By all means, Captain. Show us what you've got." As Rachel connected her laptop to the projector, her fingers trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of controlled energy. The weight of the room pressed on her shoulders. Rows of ribbons, badges, and hardened faces surrounded her. Men who'd led battalions, commanded aircraft carriers, directed operations that made headlines. She was a systems developer, someone who built frameworks and protocols, not someone who barked orders in deserts or jungles. But she'd been on the ground too, Kandahar, Baghdad, the outskirts of Jalalabad. She'd seen what chaos looked like when comms went down. She'd watched helicopters circle aimlessly over smoke because data links failed mid-transmission. She'd seen soldiers die because technology couldn't keep up with human instinct. That's why she built this. Project Titanlink, she began, her voice steady, projecting across the table. A unified real-time coordination system integrating live drone feeds, field telemetry, and voice relay into one network accessible across all branches. The first slide appeared crisp maps layered with moving icons. Data points pulsed with motion. She'd spent nights designing that interface herself. "This system," she continued, "reduces miscommunication between units by streamlining all command channels. In recent field drills, Titanlink cut mission delays by 43% and eliminated redundant relay losses completely. Before she could finish, Davis let out a low chuckle. 43%? That's a nice round number, Captain. Very statistical. A few officers laughed again. Rachel froze for a second, then exhaled slowly through her nose. It's a verified average across 7 field simulations, sir, she replied calmly, including one with SEA, L-Team 6 in Nevada. That caught the room's attention. The laughter tapered off, though Davis still smirked. SEALs, huh? You expect us to believe they use this? Yes, sir, she said evenly. And they requested extended testing authorization after deployment. His eyes narrowed. Well, unless a SEAL shows up to confirm that, I'll take that claim with a grain of salt. The words hit like a slap, but Rachel refused to flinch. Instead, she turned the next slide live field footage from the Nevada simulation. The screen lit up with night vision imagery. A small strike team moved through rough terrain, illuminated by green silhouettes. Observe timestamp synchronization, Rachel said, her tone even. Each operative's tracker updates within 1.2 seconds across all command nodes. The footage shifted to an overhead drone view. The coordination was seamless teams, moving like chess pieces guided by invisible precision. This was recorded during a simulated extraction, she added, her heart pounding. The system predicted and corrected a potential friendly fire incident in real time. The laughter was gone now. Silence settled across the room. Still, Davis broke it with a scoff. Simulated, he said, emphasizing the word. We'll see how it handles real operations. Rachel locked eyes with him. It already has, sir. That drew a few surprised looks. She clicked one more key. The final slide showed encrypted field reports, stamped confidential. Verified deployment Kandahar, 2022. Davis's jaw tightened. You deployed unapproved software in a combat zone? It was approved under emergency conditions, Rachel replied. A communication failure jeopardized an extraction. The local command greenlit my system as a backup. It worked. Everyone made it out. The colonel leaned back, arms crossed, but didn't answer. For the first time, his smirk was gone. Rachel didn't push further. She simply turned off the projector, letting the silence speak. She'd made her case. After a long pause, Davis spoke again, quieter now. We'll review the data. Of course, sir. As the officers began gathering their papers, she caught fragments of murmured words. Impressive. Too ambitious. Needs field validation. But underneath it all, there was something else. Something subtle. Respect. When the last slide disappeared from the screen, Rachel stood a little taller. Her heart still raced, but her hands were steady. She'd walked into that room as a target of ridicule. She walked out of it with her dignity intact, and a seed of curiosity planted in minds that hadn't expected much from her. As she stepped into the corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering above, she exhaled deeply. The echo of laughter still rang faintly in her ears, but she smiled to herself. She didn't need to prove her worth through anger or pride. Her results would do that. What she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that someone else had already seen her work in action. Someone who owed their life to it. And soon, that person would walk into the very same room and make sure no one ever questioned her again. The conference room's air felt thicker after Captain Rachel Monroe's presentation ended. Conversations buzzed in low tones, the kind that carried judgment disguised as curiosity. She was still standing beside the projector, her palms pressed against the polished oak table to steady herself. Colonel Davis hadn't said a word in several seconds, a silence that was somehow worse than ridicule. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. So, he said, his voice loud enough to reclaim the room's attention. 43% efficiency, Captain? That's an awfully specific number. Rachel kept her tone calm. Yes, sir. 43.2 to be exact, based on operational data collected over 7 field simulations. The colonel smirked. And where exactly did you get your numbers spreadsheet, Fantasyland? A few officers chuckled again. It wasn't full laughter, but enough to carry that familiar sting through the air. Rachel's jaw tightened. She refused to let her frustration show. She had expected this. She'd fought this same battle every time she entered a room where rank and gender meant more than merit. She lifted the remote control again, clicking to the next slide. These are live simulations from the Nevada desert, she said, conducted with mixed branch coordination teams. As you'll see, Titan Link reduces command lag between ground forces, drones, and command centers by nearly half. The video began to play a grainy night vision clip of soldiers moving through scrubland, gunfire echoing faintly through the speakers. In the dim light of the room, the moving green figures glowed across faces lined with skepticism. At first, a few officers leaned back in boredom. Then, the markers on the display began to move in sync, teams adjusting positions with mathematical precision. Every maneuver was mirrored by the on-screen feed. The coordination was uncanny, almost mechanical in its efficiency. Rachel pointed to the timeline. This synchronization prevented a crossfire. One unit had misread GPS data. Titan Link auto-corrected it before shots were fired. That drew murmurs. A few men leaned forward. Even Davis's smirk faltered slightly. It's a simulation, he said finally, though quieter. You can make a computer do anything if you program it to win. Rachel looked up at him, unflinching. Sir, the data isn't simulated. It's from active deployment. The colonel's brow furrowed. Active deployment? Yes, sir. She met his eyes. Titan Link was used in a real combat operation under emergency clearance. The room shifted again. Chairs creaked. Someone muttered, "Real?" Davis tilted his head. You're saying your system was used in an unauthorized field test? Rachel's voice was even. Authorized under command-level emergency. A communications failure during extraction in Kandahar left a SEAL unit blind. Titan Link restored link stability within 30 seconds. That got everyone's attention. You're telling us a Navy SEAL team used this? Davis said, his voice louder now. Yes, sir. A thin silence followed. Then, Davis leaned forward, a cold grin spreading across his face. Captain, that's a bold claim. Because if what you're saying isn't verifiable, you've just confessed to violating field testing protocols. Rachel didn't flinch. It's verifiable, sir. The operation report is classified, but I've submitted excerpts through official channels. The colonel tapped his pen on the table. Convenient. She stared at him, feeling the heat in her chest rise. He wanted her to break, to snap, to stutter, to make a mistake that would prove him right. But she wouldn't. She couldn't. Her father's words echoed faintly in her mind. You don't win respect by shouting, Rachel. You win it by outlasting. Before she could respond, a faint knock echoed from the door. The colonel frowned. We're in a meeting, he snapped. The door opened anyway. A man in navy blues stepped in, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with that unshakable confidence that comes only from real combat. His hair was short, his jaw squared, his posture precise. The silver trident pinned to his uniform caught the overhead light, a SEAL insignia. Every officer in the room straightened instinctively. Apologies for the interruption, sir, he said, his voice calm but commanding. Lieutenant Jake Cross, Naval Special Warfare. Colonel Davis blinked. Lieutenant Cross. This is a classified evaluation. What brings you here? I was invited, Jake replied, pulling a chair from the wall and sitting down without asking permission. He placed a folder on the table. I received a request from Systems Command regarding Captain Monroe's Titan Link project. I believe I can offer first-hand feedback. Rachel's heart skipped. She hadn't expected him not today. She recognized the name from the Kandahar report. The SEAL team leader who'd filed the commendation that saved her from disciplinary review. Davis eyed him skeptically. First-hand? Yes, sir, Jake said, meeting his gaze. My team was the one extracted using our software. The room went dead silent. Even the hum of the projector seemed to fade. The colonel tried to recover. You're saying this program actually functioned under combat conditions? Jake nodded slowly. Not just functioned. It worked. We were cut off during the Kandahar breach, 3 minutes of dead comms. No visual feeds, chaos everywhere. Then Titan Link went live. Within seconds, we had full situational awareness. Without it, 3 of my men would have been left behind or worse. Every pair of eyes turned to Rachel. Colonel Davis's tone softened, but his pride fought for ground. You're certain this was the same system? Jake opened his folder and slid a printed report across the table. My after-action notes, sir. Logged under my name, time-stamped, encrypted. Verified by command. The colonel's jaw tightened. Jake leaned back, folding his arms. You've been grilling her like she's bluffing. I can tell you she's not. This thing saved lives. Rachel stood perfectly still, barely breathing. She could feel every heartbeat echoing in her chest. The colonel's face was unreadable now. The arrogance had drained from it, replaced by something heavier unease, maybe guilt. He looked at Rachel for a long moment, but didn't speak. Jake glanced her way. Their eyes met briefly. No words, no nod, just quiet acknowledgement. She had built something that mattered, and someone who'd lived through it was here to prove it. For the rest of the meeting, no one spoke above a whisper. The tension had shifted, not against her this time, but toward the colonel. Every officer there now knew that Captain Monroe's spreadsheet fantasy had saved real soldiers. When the meeting finally adjourned, Davis stood, adjusting his uniform. We'll reconvene after reviewing these reports, he muttered, not meeting Rachel's eyes. Jake stood too, offering her a faint smile. You've got more guts than most people in this building, Captain. Rachel almost laughed. Coming from a SEAL, I'll take that as high praise. He grinned, extending his hand. Keep building. We need more minds like yours out there. Their handshake was brief but solid. When he left the room, the colonel didn't say a word. Rachel gathered her files, her pulse finally slowing. As she stepped into the corridor, the silence behind her felt different than before. It wasn't the cold silence of dismissal. It was the heavy silence that follows realization. Her software had spoken for her, and for the first time, the Pentagon had listened. The room felt frozen, as if the air itself had stopped moving. Lieutenant Jake Cross's words lingered in the space between silence and disbelief. Without it, he'd said quietly, 3 of my men wouldn't have made it home. No one spoke. Not even Colonel Davis, whose earlier smirk had vanished entirely. The weight of what Jake said, what it meant pressed on every person in that sterile Pentagon conference room. Rachel stood motionless near the projector. She'd imagined this moment 100 times. Validation, recognition, respect. But now that it was here, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy like a truth, finally breaking through walls of arrogance and doubt. Davis cleared his throat, his voice low. Lieutenant Cross, you're certain this data reflects a live mission? Jake turned his piercing blue eyes toward him. Yes, sir. Operation Claymore, Kandahar Province. Classified extraction under fire. He spoke with the calm authority of a man who didn't need to exaggerate. Every syllable landed like a hammer. We lost comms 3 minutes in, he continued. Our relay was down, satellite interference, total blackout. Command couldn't see us, and we couldn't see each other. Then the Titan Link network came online, real-time positioning, sensed feeds, clear comms. Rachel felt her throat tighten. She remembered that night vividly, even though she wasn't there in person. She had been in a secure room in Nevada, watching lines of code dance across her monitors, her hands trembling as she rerouted broken signal chains. She'd prayed silently that her system wouldn't fail when it mattered most. Jake's voice deepened. We were pinned by small arms fire. 2 men wounded. If Titan Link hadn't recalibrated drone surveillance mid-mission, we'd have walked straight into an ambush. Someone exhaled loudly, the kind of sound people make when they realize what's truly at stake. Colonel Davis's face remained stone, but his posture had changed, less rigid, more uncertain. Lieutenant, he said slowly, are you implying this Air Force project directly altered your field outcome? Jake didn't hesitate. Not implying, sir, confirming. He opened the folder he'd brought and slid a photograph across the table. The image showed 6 soldiers, dusty and tired, standing beside a Black Hawk under the fading Afghan sunset. That's my team, he said. Every one of them made it home. Because of her. All eyes turned toward Rachel. She stood there, trying to find words, but they wouldn't come. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Colonel Davis shifted uncomfortably. He reached for the photograph, but stopped halfway, his hand hovering over it. I see. Jake leaned forward slightly, his tone sharpening. No, sir, I don't think you do. You see, when you're out there, when bullets are flying and people are screaming, you don't care what branch someone's from. You care about what works. Her system worked. That's all that matters. The colonel said nothing. Around the table, several officers exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded subtly. Others looked down, ashamed of having laughed minutes earlier. Rachel's voice finally found its way out. Lieutenant, I didn't know it was your team that used it. Jake gave a faint smile. I figured as much. But Command knew. They filed your system's code signature in our after-action report. I made sure it stayed in there. He turned toward Davis again. Captain Monroe didn't just build software, she built a lifeline. And she did it while people like us doubted her. The silence that followed was electric. Colonel Davis cleared his throat again, this time softer. Lieutenant, your commendation will be added to the review. Jake frowned. You can add whatever you like, sir. Just make sure her name's on it this time. For the first time, Davis had no reply. The meeting should have ended there. But something remarkable happened instead. One of the Marine officers, Major Grant, a seasoned combat veteran with graying temples, spoke up. Captain Monroe, he said gruffly, if Titan Link's stable under live fire, I want it evaluated for Marine logistics immediately. Rachel blinked in surprise. Thank you, sir. I'll coordinate with your team. Then another voice joined in. Army Recon could use that overlay integration, said a lieutenant colonel across the table. We've been patching through 3 different systems for years. The momentum shifted completely. In minutes, the tone of the room transformed from skepticism to urgency. Everyone suddenly wanted a piece of what they just dismissed. Rachel listened, overwhelmed but steady. For months, she'd fought to get a chance, just one, to prove Titan Link's worth. Now, validation was arriving faster than she could process it. Meanwhile, Jake leaned back in his chair, watching her quietly. He wasn't the kind of man who sought attention, but there was pride in his eyes, the kind soldiers reserve for seeing competence win over ego. After the discussion wound down, Colonel Davis finally spoke again. Captain Monroe, he said, voice neutral, you'll provide full documentation for Command's review. Pending approval, Titan Link will advance to multi-branch evaluation. Rachel nodded, professional, composed. "Yes, sir." Davis adjusted his collar. "Good work." It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in the armor. As the officers stood, papers shuffled, chairs scraped, and quiet conversations filled the air. Rachel started packing her laptop. She felt someone stop beside her. Jake. He handed her a folded piece of paper. "My direct contact," he said, "in case command needs further verification." She took it, but his tone softened. "Or in case you ever need someone to remind them what you're capable of." Rachel smiled slightly. "I'll keep that in mind, Lieutenant." He looked around the room, then back at her. "You know, in the field, we don't care what color uniform someone wears. We just care that they've got our backs. You had ours." Before she could reply, he straightened, brought his hand to his brow, and saluted her. It was deliberate, sharp, public. The few officers still in the room froze mid-motion. An active-duty Navy SEAL saluting an Air Force captain in a Pentagon conference wasn't standard protocol. It was a statement. Rachel hesitated only a second before returning the salute, her voice quiet. "Thank you, Lieutenant." When Jake lowered his hand, he gave a final nod and left without another word. The silence afterward was deafening. Every person still in the room seemed to stare at Rachel differently, now not with condescension or amusement, but with something resembling admiration. Even Colonel Davis didn't move for a few seconds, watching the door Jake had exited through. He finally exhaled, muttering almost to himself, "Well, that's a first." Rachel gathered her things, her movements calm but purposeful. Her heart was racing, but not from nerves this time, from clarity. The respect she'd been denied had been earned, not demanded. And it had been given, not by policy or politics, but by truth. As she stepped out into the long, gleaming hallway, the reflection of her uniform followed her on the glass walls, blue, bright, and unshaken. For the first time in her career, she didn't feel small in those Pentagon corridors. She felt seen. And though she didn't know it yet, that single salute would ripple far beyond that room. Within days, word would spread across departments. Officers would whisper about the captain the SEALs saluted. But for now, Rachel just walked on steady, composed, and quietly proud. Because sometimes the loudest vindication comes not in words, but in silence after someone finally stands up for you. By the time Rachel stepped out of the conference room, whispers had already started. Pentagon halls had a way of carrying stories faster than radio waves. And this one, an elite Navy SEAL saluting an Air Force captain in front of half a dozen senior officers, was spreading like wildfire. Down the long, gleaming corridor, Rachel's boots clicked softly against the polished floor. She wasn't used to people noticing her, but now every uniformed officer who passed gave a quick glance, some curious, some approving, others simply confused. In a place ruled by hierarchy and formality, unofficial respect was the rarest currency of all. Inside the conference room, Colonel Davis remained seated after everyone left. He stared at the empty chair across the table, the one Rachel had occupied moments ago. The scene replayed in his mind, the salute, the silence, the realization that maybe he'd underestimated someone who had never sought to impress him. For years, Davis had prided himself on reading people quickly. He believed he could tell the difference between competence and arrogance, brilliance and naivety. But this time, he'd been wrong. The colonel leaned back, rubbing his temple. He'd spent decades in uniform, fighting for credibility in a world where mistakes had consequences measured in lives. Yet somehow, his greatest misstep today wasn't on the battlefield. It was in a conference room, directed at a woman who had just proven him wrong without ever raising her voice. A sharp knock broke his thoughts. "Enter," he said flatly. Major Grant stepped in, closing the door behind him. "Sir," he began cautiously, "I think we need to talk about Captain Monroe." Davis raised an eyebrow. I assume you're referring to what just happened. Grant nodded. That salute? People are already talking. The Navy, the Air Force, even Strategic Command. Word's getting around that Monroe's tech saved a SEAL unit in the field. The colonel's jaw tightened. You believe it? Grant's answer was immediate. I do. Cross isn't the kind of man who exaggerates. If he said Titan Link saved lives, it did. Davis stood, pacing slowly. And now everyone wants a piece of her project. Sir, Grant said carefully, maybe that's not a bad thing. Davis shot him a look. You're suggesting I endorse her now? After I called her unfit for cross-branch integration 2 weeks ago? I'm suggesting, Grant replied evenly, that you reassess your position before someone else does it for you. The colonel stopped walking. He knew what that meant. The Pentagon's higher-ups loved results, not reputations. And Monroe suddenly had both. Meanwhile, Rachel sat in her small office, tucked near the lower wing of the Defense Research Division. Her workspace was modest, barely big enough for a desk, a coffee maker, and 2 chairs, but it had become her sanctuary. She was scrolling through her inbox when a new email popped up from an address she didn't recognize. LT Jake Cross, SEAL Team 6, active duty. Captain Monroe, thought you'd want to know. Command authorized me to share our mission logs with your project's review board. They'll validate everything I said today. Also, word is your name's being mentioned in some high circles. Don't let them rewrite the story without you in it. Respectfully, Rachel read it twice, then leaned back in her chair. For the first time in months, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel relief. Still, she knew recognition in the military world didn't come without resistance. Her instincts proved right when her phone buzzed an hour later. Captain Monroe, came the stern voice of Colonel Davis. My office. 1500 hours. She froze for half a second. Yes, sir. I'll be there. When she arrived, Davis's door was closed, a bad sign. But when she knocked and entered, the atmosphere was different. The colonel wasn't sitting behind his desk in his usual commanding posture. He was standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over Arlington. Captain, he said without turning, take a seat. She did. He spoke after a long pause. You've made quite an impression today. Rachel chose her words carefully. That wasn't my intent, sir. I only presented the data. Davis nodded slightly. And yet a SEAL lieutenant nearly overturned half the command structure by saluting you in my meeting. She said nothing. He turned finally, studying her face. I owe you an apology. The words didn't sound forced. They sounded heavy, reluctant, but sincere. I judged you before understanding the full scope of your work, he continued. I saw a uniform and an idea, not the results behind them. That's on me. Rachel's posture remained formal. Thank you, sir. He walked around to his desk, placing a folder in front of her. This is the updated directive. Command wants Titan Link evaluated for all branch integration. You'll lead the process. Her breath caught. Me, sir? Yes, he said simply. Effective immediately. She blinked, trying to process the shift. 2 weeks ago, she couldn't get her emails answered. Now she was being placed in charge of a cross-branch program that could change how the U.S. military operated. Davis must have seen the disbelief in her face because his tone softened. You've earned this. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Rachel straightened her shoulders. I won't, sir. He nodded once. Good. And Captain? Yes, sir? If Cross ever visits this building again, he said dryly, remind him that salutes go both ways. For the first time, Rachel saw the faintest hint of humor in his eyes. Over the next several weeks, Titan Link became the talk of the Pentagon. Rachel's small team expanded to include analysts from multiple branches: Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, all reporting to her. The transition wasn't easy. Some officers struggled to take orders from a woman they'd once dismissed. Others found themselves quietly impressed by her precision and composure. But what Rachel didn't realize was that Jake Cross was still advocating for her, even outside the building. In training briefings and command reviews, he made sure every mention of Titan Link included her name. Back in D.C., Colonel Davis found himself defending her project in meetings he once would have blocked. Not out of obligation, but conviction. He'd seen what leadership rooted in quiet competence looked like, and it had changed something in him. He even caught himself saying it aloud one morning during a staff briefing. Sometimes the best officers don't raise their voices, they raise standards. No one missed the reference. Late one evening, after another long day of cross-branch testing, Rachel stood alone in her office, staring at the small plaque on her desk that read, Capt. R. Monroe. The world outside her window glowed with city lights and the faint hum of night air. She thought of her younger self, the one who doubted if she'd ever be taken seriously, the one who stayed up nights coding systems no one believed in. She smiled faintly. Then her phone buzzed again, another message from Jake. Heard about the promotion board meeting next week. I'll be watching from afar. Don't let them talk over you. You've already earned your seat at that table. Rachel looked at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, Thanks, Lieutenant. And for what it's worth, your salute did more than any award ever could. She hit send, set the phone down, and exhaled deeply. Because sometimes respect isn't granted by rank or medals. It's earned in the quiet aftermath, when even the ones who doubted you start standing behind your name. And that, Rachel thought as she switched off the light, was the real victory. Weeks had passed since Lieutenant Cross's unexpected entrance, and the aftermath of that moment still reverberated through Pentagon corridors. Titan Link had gone from a niche software project to a program everyone wanted a piece of: Army, Marines, Navy, and Air Force alike. And at the center of it all was Rachel Monroe, a captain suddenly tasked with navigating the cross-branch bureaucracy that often felt like a battlefield of its own. She sat at her desk in the Defense Systems Integration Office, eyes scanning through reports streaming from every branch. Drones, tactical overlays, satellite feeds, the data flowed ceaselessly, but she didn't flinch. She had faced chaos before. She knew how to remain calm, how to parse mountains of information without losing focus. A knock on the door broke her concentration. Enter, she said without looking up. Colonel Davis stepped in, closing the door behind him. He looked different than when they'd last met, less rigid, slightly humbled, more contemplative. He carried a folder and a tablet under his arm. Captain Monroe, he began, Titan Link is being reviewed at a higher level than I anticipated. She finally looked up, raising an eyebrow. Sir, he handed her the folder. This is an invitation for a joint briefing with the Joint Chiefs next week. They want to see the latest field test results and understand the operational impact firsthand. Rachel's pulse quickened. A meeting with the Joint Chiefs was unheard of for someone at her rank, especially a young captain who had spent years in technical roles rather than commanding units. Yes, sir. I'll prepare accordingly, she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Davis nodded. You'll need to focus on concise, impactful results. The Chiefs don't have time for simulations. They want actionable insight. And Captain, make sure you claim the credit where it's due. Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. Understood, sir. As he turned to leave, he paused. Rachel, remember, leadership isn't just about creating solutions. It's about guiding people to believe in those solutions. She nodded. Thank you, sir. That evening, Rachel reviewed every piece of operational data Titan Link had collected. Her small team had worked tirelessly, running cross-branch simulations, troubleshooting integration issues, and coordinating with field units. Her laptop screen glowed with heat maps, unit tracking, and real-time feed analytics. The complexity was dizzying, but she had built systems like this before. What she hadn't anticipated was the political pressure that now accompanied her work. By the second day, she received a direct message from Lieutenant Cross. "Captain, word is some general is trying to claim Titan Link as a branch initiative. Keep your documentation tight and your presentation tighter. They won't question ASEAL's report, but they'll question a captain's title." Rachel smirked. Jake had a way of cutting through bureaucracy with a few words, but he was right. Recognition was never simple in military corridors. It was fought for at every level. The next morning, as she walked toward the briefing room, she felt the weight of expectation. Officers in her path offered polite nods. Some whispered quietly, undoubtedly passing along tallies of the SEAL salute and her command of the field results. Her reputation had grown, and yet the scrutiny intensified. When she arrived, the room was already filled with mid-ranking officers, analysts, and a few colonels. A 4-star general sat near the head of the table, reviewing notes with a detached expression. Rachel noticed him eyeing the projection screen with measured curiosity. She swallowed a nervous breath, straightened her uniform, and began her presentation. Titan Link, she began, is a cross-branch communication and tactical coordination system. It integrates real-time data from field units, drones, and command centers into a single interface. Our recent deployment in Kandahar has demonstrated a 43% reduction in mission latency and elimination of redundant relay failures. Field operations conducted under the system have resulted in 0 casualties attributable to miscommunication. The general lifted an eyebrow. "And who oversees this project, Captain?" Rachel met his gaze. "I do, sir. Full operational authority rests with me for all cross-branch simulations and integration trials." A murmur ran through the room. Some officers whispered, impressed. Others looked skeptical. One colonel leaned forward. "Are you saying this is a single captain's initiative? Not a joint branch effort?" Rachel nodded. "Sir, it originated as a systems integration proposal within the Air Force, but has now been tested and validated with Navy and Army units. Lieutenant Jake Cross of SEAL Team 6 has personally verified its effectiveness during live operations." At that, the general's gaze sharpened. "Cross?" he asked, leaning back. Rachel nodded again. "He saluted me in the Pentagon briefing to acknowledge the software's impact on his team's survival. I believe the data, combined with his field report, demonstrates both the software's efficacy and the operational trust it has earned." There was silence. Then, slowly, one officer began nodding. Another followed. Within moments, the room had shifted from doubt to cautious respect. A general tapped his pen on the table, studying her. "Captain Monroe, if your metrics hold under extended testing, this could change the way we coordinate across every branch. But it needs full transparency, full validation, and most importantly, documentation proving your leadership in its creation." Rachel's lips pressed into a tight smile. "All of it is in the reports I submitted, sir. Cross-verified, time-stamped, and fully encrypted." He nodded. "Very well. Then we'll move forward on full-scale trials." After the briefing, Rachel returned to her office, where her small team was waiting. There were smiles, quiet congratulations, and murmurs of awe at the presentation she just delivered. "Captain," said Lieutenant Ramirez, one of her junior analysts, "you were incredible." The general actually listened. Rachel shook her head. "It wasn't me. It was the system. The software did its job. The results spoke for themselves." "Still," Ramirez said, "you stood up in front of all of them." and no one could ignore you. Rachel exhaled slowly. Leadership, she realized, wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about presenting truth in a way they couldn't dismiss. Her thoughts drifted to Lieutenant Cross. Without his support, she might have been another analyst drowned in skepticism. His presence had lent credibility to her work, but she also knew that her own preparation, composure, and expertise had carried her through the room. That evening, Rachel received another secure communication from Cross. Captain Monroe, just heard the briefing. Impressive. You held the room without hesitation. That general won't forget you or your work. Keep it tight, and don't let anyone rewrite the story. She smiled, closing the message. Every day, the stakes were higher. The software success had catapulted her into visibility, and with visibility came scrutiny, politics, and the unspoken challenge of protecting her work from those who might claim credit. But Rachel didn't feel fear. She felt determination. She looked at her desk one last time before leaving. The small plaque reading Capt. R. Monroe glimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. For the first time, the name felt heavy with responsibility and light with promise. As she stepped into the hallway, her reflection in the polished wall mirrored a woman transformed, not by rank, not by metal, but by resilience, precision, and the quiet power of truth. In the coming days, Pentagon whispers would intensify. Officers from multiple branches would request meetings. Analysts would seek mentorship. Commanders would ask for her guidance. But Rachel knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge wasn't proving her system's worth. It was guiding it safely through the labyrinth of military politics while preserving her credit and vision. And somewhere out there, Lieutenant Jake Cross had already become her invisible ally. The quiet confirmation that, no matter how high the stakes, truth and competence would always find a way to command respect. That night, as Rachel left the Pentagon under the glow of streetlights, she felt the shift in her own heart. She wasn't just an analyst anymore. She was a leader. And TitanLink wasn't just software, it was a symbol. A symbol that one woman, armed with knowledge, courage, and relentless perseverance, could turn mockery into recognition, doubt into respect, and skepticism into unwavering belief. And this was only the start. The Pentagon corridors hummed with a new energy. TitanLink was no longer just a software project. It had become a symbol of innovation, resilience, and inter-branch cooperation. And at the center of it all was Captain Rachel Monroe, whose reputation now preceded her. Yet the recognition brought more than admiration. It brought scrutiny. Every report she submitted, every simulation she ran, and every brief she delivered was dissected, questioned, and debated. She had faced skepticism before, but now the stakes were higher. Mistakes weren't just technical, they could be political. Colonel Davis entered her office unannounced, holding a folder that seemed heavier than it should have been. Captain Monroe, he said, closing the door behind him, TitanLink is scheduled for its first multi-branch live exercise. This is the real deal. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, all of it. And I want you leading it. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. Leading it? You mean overseeing deployment, coordination, and real-time command integration across branches? He nodded. Exactly. And yes, I realize that's unprecedented for a captain at your rank. But this isn't about rank, Monroe. It's about competence, and you've already proven you have it. She swallowed, feeling both pride and the weight of responsibility pressing down like never before. I understand, sir. I'll prepare accordingly. Davis gave a rare smile, one that lacked smugness and carried something more genuine, respect. Good. And Captain, don't let anyone take credit for your work. This time, it's yours. The next week, the joint exercise began at a sprawling military base outside Washington. Rachel arrived early, reviewing deployment maps, real-time data feeds, and communications channels. Analysts and officers from every branch were present, some skeptical, others curious. Lieutenant Jake Cross appeared shortly after sunrise, observing silently but offering quiet nods of encouragement. His presence reminded her that credibility wasn't just technical. It was earned on the battlefield, validated by lives saved. The exercise began with a simulated hostage extraction in rugged terrain. Drones, GPS trackers, satellite feeds, and field units were all linked through Titan Link. Command centers across branches communicated in real time, while Rachel coordinated from the Central Operations Hub. "Remember," she said to her team, "accuracy first, clarity second. Don't anticipate what someone else might miss. Ensure Titan Link does its job." Hours into the exercise, an unexpected glitch occurred. A communication node failed mid-simulation, cutting off the Army's forward unit from drone feeds. The room held its collective breath. This was the kind of test she had feared, not failure in isolation, but cascading failure across multiple branches. Rachel's fingers flew across her terminal, rerouting signal chains, recalibrating encryption protocols, and redirecting live drone feeds. Within 30 seconds, the Army unit regained full situational awareness. A faint murmur of surprise spread across the room. "Impressive," whispered a Marine major. Rachel didn't pause. Another complication arose. A Navy unit reported GPS interference. Again, she adjusted settings, resensed tracking devices, and within seconds, the unit's position appeared accurately on every interface. By the time the exercise concluded, every branch had successfully completed its objectives, with 0 casualties and no operational missteps. The command center erupted in subdued applause, technical, respectful, but meaningful. Colonel Davis approached her as the team began debriefing. "Captain Monroe," he said, voice steady, "Titan Link just earned its operational green light across all branches. And you earned every bit of credit for it." Rachel nodded, letting the validation sink in. For months, she had faced ridicule, skepticism, and even open mockery. Today, she had turned all of that into undeniable proof of competence and leadership. Lieutenant Cross approached, offering a rare, faint smile. "I told you they'd remember your name." Rachel laughed quietly. "I didn't know they'd remember it so fast." "You've done more than prove software," he said. "You've proven that leadership can come from anyone who understands both the human and the technical side of war." A week later, the Pentagon held a formal recognition ceremony. Officers from all branches attended, their uniforms crisp, medals gleaming, and eyes attentive. Colonel Davis stepped to the podium first. "Today," he began, "we recognize a remarkable achievement in military operations and cross-branch integration. A system called Titan Link has not only improved our communication and tactical coordination, but has proven its worth under combat-like conditions." He paused, letting his gaze sweep the audience. Then he looked directly at Rachel. "Captain, Rachel Monroe conceived, developed, and implemented this system. She has led its testing, deployment, and real-time integration. And she did so while earning the respect of some of the most demanding combat units in our forces, including Navy SEALs." A murmur ran through the audience. Several officers glanced at each other in surprise, while others nodded appreciatively. Davis continued, "This recognition is not just for her technical skill, but for her leadership, her dedication, and her courage to stand firm when many doubted her." He stepped back. For the first time in months, Rachel felt the weight of genuine acknowledgement. No ridicule, no whispered jokes, just recognition. When the applause began, Rachel scanned the room, spotting Lieutenant Cross in the back. He gave a subtle nod, and for a moment, their silent communication said more than words ever could. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, several officers approached Rachel, offering congratulations asking questions about the system and expressing interest in further collaboration. Colonel Davis lingered. "Captain Monroe," he said, quietly, "you've changed the way we think about software, integration, and leadership. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Rachel nodded. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." He hesitated, then added, "And I'll admit, I underestimated you." She smiled softly. "Underestimation is often a good motivator, sir." The next day, Rachel reviewed the post-exercise reports. Titan Link's effectiveness had exceeded even her expectations. Communication delays were reduced by 57%, and field units reported smoother coordination than any prior system had allowed. But she also knew this success was only the beginning. With recognition came responsibility, more scrutiny, more deployments, and the looming challenge of preserving her work from bureaucratic interference or misattribution. Her phone buzzed a secure message from Jake Cross. "Captain, congratulations. You've officially turned Titan Link from an idea into a legacy. Now comes the next phase, making sure it survives the politics as well as it survived the field." Rachel leaned back in her chair. The road ahead was daunting. But she had faced ridicule, skepticism, and near dismissal before. She smiled faintly. "Let them try," she whispered to herself. "I've come too far to let them take this away." Outside the window, the city lights of Washington glimmered like a constellation of possibility. And Captain Rachel Monroe, for the first time, felt she was not just part of the system, she was the system, a force that would shape the future of military operations. The morning air at the Forward Operations Base was sharp and electric, carrying the scent of dust, fuel, and anticipation. Captain Rachel Monroe stood near the command tent, monitoring the live feeds streaming from units in the field. This was no simulation. This was Titan Link's first real operational deployment beyond controlled exercises. Her laptop glowed with tactical overlays, unit positions, and real-time communications. Analysts from every branch surrounded her, providing constant updates, while Lieutenant Jake Cross stood a few feet away, observing silently, arms folded, every so often offering subtle corrections or confirmations. The mission was delicate, a joint rescue and extraction of hostages captured by an insurgent cell in a contested zone. Intelligence suggested the hostiles were armed with small arms, RPGs, and potential improvised explosive devices. Timing and precision were everything. One misstep could cost lives, American and allied. "Captain Monroe," Major Grant said, his voice taut with tension, "we have 3 units inbound. 2 Air Force teams, 1 Army Recon detachment. All units are counting on Titan Link for coordinated entry and exit." Rachel nodded, her focus laser-sharp. "Understood. Confirm comes for all units. Cross, run the integrity check for the satellite uplink. I want no interruptions." Jake's eyes scanned the displays. Uplink green. No latency issues. Drone feeds are stable. "We're good to go, Captain." A hush fell over the operations center as the first unit approached the target zone. Rachel's fingers danced across the keyboard, her eyes flicking between live feeds and tactical overlays. She wasn't just monitoring. She was actively directing, adjusting drone flight paths, recalibrating GPS signals, ensuring every unit had precise situational awareness. And then chaos. A sudden alert flashed on her screen. A communication node went down. The Army Recon team's feed disappeared, leaving them blind in hostile territory. Seconds ticked by. Node 3 compromised. Rachel barked. Reroute through backup link. Drone support, recalibrate surveillance overlay. Adjust unit vectors now. The room erupted into controlled frenzy. Analysts shouted updates. Radios crackled with urgent messages. – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – Minutes stretched like hours. Then, as she recalibrated the network, the Army unit's position appeared again, highlighted on the overlay. Their live feed returned. "Got it," she said calmly, though her pulse raced. Jake crossed his arms, a subtle smile forming. "Nice recovery." Rachel allowed herself a brief nod, but didn't relax. She knew this was only the beginning. Another complication arose, one of the Air Force. Teams reported unexpected enemy movement, an ambush forming near the extraction point. "Captain," a junior analyst shouted, "multiple hostiles moving southeast at grid 43.12. Rachel's mind raced. She assessed every variable, the terrain, unit positions, cover points, drone angles. Divert the southern flank drones to monitor movement. Relay positions to all units. Update their approach vectors. Confirm interception timing." Jake tapped rapidly on a tablet. Vectors corrected. Units acknowledge. Drone coverage optimized. Seconds later, the drones provided live thermal imaging. Units adjusted their approach mid-mission, avoiding the ambush entirely. "Good," Rachel muttered, barely audible over the hum of radios and chatter. "Let's keep them safe." Full mission focus. No distractions. Hours passed. The hostage location was reached without casualties. Extraction was underway. Titan Link coordinated air support, ground units, and medical teams with precise timing. Each movement was calculated, predictive, and fluid. Rachel's nerves remained taut, but her focus never wavered. And then the worst-case scenario emerged. One of the hostages attempted to flee and triggered an IED. The blast threw nearby units off balance. For a moment, chaos threatened to spiral. "Status." Rachel barked, eyes scanning the feed. Jake leaned forward, pointing at the display. "Blast impact contained. Unit is stable, but minor injuries reported. Drone feed shows clear extraction path rerouting now." Rachel recalculated angles, redirecting support units, and adjusting the timing of drone surveillance. "Confirm path to extraction now. Air support, hold pattern until hostages are clear. Medical unit, stand by for immediate deployment." Seconds later, the path was clear. The hostages were evacuated successfully, and every unit made it back to the extraction point without further incident. The room erupted in a mixture of relief and subdued celebration. Officers shook their heads in disbelief, analysts exhaled, and even Colonel Davis, observing remotely via video link, sent a short message. "Outstanding coordination. Titan Link just saved lives. Captain Monroe, report to my office." Rachel exhaled deeply, finally allowing herself a moment of relief. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of having orchestrated life and death coordination with perfect precision. She glanced at Jake, who offered a rare, approving smile. "You kept your cool," he said. "And you didn't just run the system, you led the units. That's what makes the difference." Rachel nodded, letting herself absorb the praise. "It's the system, Lieutenant. It does exactly what it was designed for, if the human in charge knows how to use it properly." "Exactly," he said, though his eyes betrayed his admiration for her as the human in charge. Later that evening, back at the base's debriefing tent, Rachel faced a full panel of senior officers from all branches. They analyzed logs, playback footage, and real-time decision timelines. Every instruction she had given, every reroute she had executed, every calculation she had performed was scrutinized. And yet, the result was unanimous. Titan Link had not only performed flawlessly under extreme conditions, but its leadership integration, the decisions Rachel had made, had prevented loss of life. One of the generals, a hard-eyed veteran with decades in combat, finally spoke. "Captain Monroe, you didn't just implement technology. You demonstrated command under pressure. That's rare in any branch, at any rank. Outstanding work. The panel nodded, several officers offering quiet, sincere applause. Rachel allowed herself a small, composed smile. Months of struggle, skepticism, and doubt had culminated in this moment. Colonel Davis, appearing in the rear of the tent, gave her a subtle nod. He had been her most vocal critic at first, and yet now he was among the first to recognize her achievement openly. That night, Rachel sat alone in her tent, reviewing the mission logs. Titan Link had performed beyond expectation. Every drone feed, every GPS fix, every communication node had functioned flawlessly, even under unpredictable, chaotic conditions. Her phone buzzed with a secure message from Lieutenant Cross. "Captain Monroe, I don't send compliments lightly, but today, you ran the system like a seasoned commander, not just a developer. You kept everyone alive. Well done." Rachel typed back, her fingers steady but her heart still racing. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Couldn't have done it without your verification and support." She leaned back, letting exhaustion wash over her. For the first time, the weight of responsibility felt like a triumph rather than a burden. Tomorrow would bring more recognition, more briefings, more political pressure, but tonight she had saved lives. Her technology had been validated in the crucible of combat. Her leadership had been tested and proven. And Captain Rachel Monroe, once doubted and mocked, now stood as the living proof that competence, courage, and perseverance could turn a single idea into a force capable of saving lives across the battlefield. Outside the tent, the night sky stretched endlessly over the base. Stars glittered faintly, reflected in the dust and lights of military vehicles. And for the first time in months, Rachel allowed herself to feel the quiet certainty. She had earned her place, her respect, and the legacy she was building, not through rank or command, but through skill, courage, and unwavering focus. The Pentagon buzzed with a rare energy that morning. Today was more than a routine briefing. It was a historic recognition ceremony. Captain Rachel Monroe, once doubted, once mocked, was about to be formally acknowledged for her life-saving work with Titan Link. Colonel Davis paced the conference room, reviewing his notes. He had learned an important lesson in humility over the past months. Mockery and underestimation had no place when competence, skill, and courage were present. Today, he would ensure that everyone knew it. The room began to fill with officers, analysts, and key personnel from every branch. Cameras and press liaisons were present and usual for a project previously confined to classified briefings. The event was gaining official attention, a testament to how far Titan Link had come. Rachel arrived early, dressed in her sharp uniform. Every medal, ribbon, and insignia reflected both her accomplishments and her journey. Yet she carried herself with calm composure, her mind focused on the significance of the moment. This wasn't about applause. It was about respect, acknowledgement, and validation, not just for herself, but for the system that had saved lives. Lieutenant Jake Cross appeared quietly at the back of the room. He didn't seek attention. He never had. But his presence carried weight. When officers looked at him, they didn't just see a SEAL. They saw a man who had risked his life, who had validated her system under combat conditions, and who had publicly saluted her when it mattered most. Colonel Davis stepped to the podium, the room falling into hushed anticipation. "Today, we recognize a remarkable achievement in military operations and cross-branch integration," he began. "Titan Link is more than software. It is a lifeline, a bridge, and a testament to innovation and leadership." He paused, scanning the audience before his eyes rested on Rachel. Captain Rachel Monroe conceived, developed, and implemented this system. She has led its deployment, tested it under the most demanding conditions, and demonstrated leadership that has saved lives. A murmur of approval ran through the room. Some officers nodded, others offered small, discreet applause. But the weight of Davis's words carried beyond gestures. They were a formal acknowledgement, a seal of legitimacy that silenced past doubts. And, Davis continued, his voice firm, her work has been validated in live operational conditions, supported and verified by Lieutenant Jake Cross of SEAL Team 6. His field confirmation, and the respect he publicly demonstrated, underscores the system's real-world effectiveness. A subtle wave of acknowledgement moved across the audience as everyone remembered the story, the SEAL salute, the quiet defiance, the truth of her competence being recognized by someone who had faced real combat. Rachel felt a swell of quiet pride. She didn't need the applause. The acknowledgement itself was enough. But when Lieutenant Cross gave a small nod from the back, she allowed herself a genuine, warm smile. Davis handed her a folded certificate. Captain Monroe, on behalf of the Joint Chiefs and Command, this recognizes your exceptional leadership and development of TitanLink. You've set a standard for innovation, courage, and cross-branch collaboration. Rachel accepted the certificate, her hands steady, but her heart racing. Thank you, sir, she said, her voice carrying both humility and strength. And Captain, Davis added, let this serve as a reminder to everyone here. Leadership comes from competence, courage, and integrity. No rank, no uniform, and no preconceived notion should ever overshadow the truth of performance. The audience erupted into applause, this time longer, more heartfelt, and inclusive of officers from every branch. Analysts, junior officers, and senior commanders alike recognized what had been achieved. Rachel could see in their eyes that the skepticism, the mockery, the doubt had been replaced with respect and admiration. Lieutenant Cross moved forward quietly, standing beside her. In a room filled with applause and acknowledgement, he gave her a subtle salute, a nod to their first encounter months ago, when he had publicly honored her work in front of the skeptical Colonel Davis and his peers. Rachel returned the salute, her eyes meeting his with a shared understanding. That single gesture had launched her journey from doubt to recognition, and now it stood as a symbol of partnership, validation, and trust. After the formal ceremony, the room broke into conversations, congratulations, and briefings. Officers from multiple branches approached her, eager to integrate TitanLink further, to learn from her leadership, and to apply the system in upcoming operations. Major Grant approached, a broad smile on his face. Captain Monroe, he said, I don't know if anyone has ever managed a project like this with such precision under pressure. Your work will change the way we operate permanently. Rachel nodded, letting the compliments sink in. Thank you, sir. The team did most of the heavy lifting, and of course, Lieutenant Cross verified everything in the field. We all worked together. Even Colonel Davis approached, his expression warmer than she had ever seen. Captain, he said quietly, you've changed my perspective. Not just on TitanLink, but on leadership, assessment, and respect. I underestimated you, and I owe you more than words can say. Rachel smiled faintly, composed yet quietly satisfied. I appreciate that, sir. And thank you for giving TitanLink a chance. In the following weeks, TitanLink was officially adopted for broader operational use. Cross-branch deployments were authorized, and Rachel's leadership role expanded. She was invited to brief higher command units, provide guidance for future system enhancements, and train officers on the integration of human decision-making with software intelligence. The SEAL lieutenant remained a constant, silent ally, lending credibility in combat validation and field operations. His first salute, once a quiet defiance at a Pentagon meeting, had now become symbolic, a reminder that acknowledgement and respect are earned, not demanded. Rachel's life had changed dramatically. She moved between technical briefings and leadership meetings with confidence, managing teams, liaising with commanders, and refining Titan Link for future operations. Yet despite her growing prominence, she remained grounded, focused on results, the welfare of units in the field, and the continual improvement of the system she had built. One evening, she reflected on the journey, from the mocking conference room, where Colonel Davis had questioned her capability, to the high-stakes live mission, where every life depended on her decisions, to this moment of recognition and legacy. It had been a path fraught with doubt, tension, and challenge. But she had endured. She had led. She had saved lives. And in the process, she had earned respect across ranks, branches, and even combat veterans who valued results above protocol. Rachel looked at her office window, the city lights of Washington glimmering like constellations against the dark sky. Her reflection merged with the stars outside, a symbolic alignment of dedication, perseverance, and achievement. For the first time, she allowed herself to think beyond the immediate tasks, the briefings, the deployments, the technical fixes. She considered the legacy of her work, how it would continue to impact operations, save lives, and inspire a culture of respect for competence and innovation. And she knew, in that quiet moment, that recognition wasn't merely about medals, promotions, or certificates. It was about proving that skill, courage, and leadership, when paired with innovation, could transform systems, lives, and even the perceptions of those who once doubted you. Lieutenant Cross sent a final secure message that evening. Captain Monroe, you've done more than validate Titan Link. You've set a standard for all of us. Respect earned is permanent. Make sure it's never lost. Rachel smiled, leaning back in her chair. It won't be, she whispered. The journey had begun with doubt, mockery, and underestimation. It had been forged in perseverance, courage, and meticulous attention to detail. And it had culminated in full recognition, not just for the system she created, but for the leadership she embodied. Captain Rachel Monroe had proven that respect, like leadership, must be earned, and when it was, it endured. And Titan Link, once a small, doubted software project, had become a cornerstone of military operations, a testament to what one determined mind, unwavering focus, and the courage to persevere could achieve. The Pentagon would remember the salute, the systems, and the captain who turned skepticism into undeniable respect. And so, her legacy was secured.